As Penny said before church started, yesterday I celebrated my 17th wedding anniversary. This series is all about marriage, but it doesn't only have to do with marriage. Marriage is just one of the primary relationships in our lives, but we have relationships with everybody, whether it's your spouse or your children or your coworkers. And what I've hyped up in this sermon series, which is probably why many of you are so intrigued and interested, is I'm going to teach you how to fight. Now, I don't know about you. I already know how to fight. I was taught from a young age how to fight, even in marriage. I mean, believe it or not, my parents fought. They are probably not proud of it, but this is the primary marriage relationship that most of us see in our lives as our parents. And I can remember my parents fighting, screaming and yelling at each other while I, as a kid, hid in my room, worried about what was going on. As my mom screamed and my dad quietly fumed, I wondered what was going to happen. And this is how our fights tend to be. Problems arise. There are problems in every relationship, but we stuff them. We hide them under the rug. We ignore them until they become so big that we can't. And we begin to make snide comments or poke or provoke until we result in a fight. And once we get to that fight, our only goal is to win, to do whatever it takes to ridicule or belittle, to score enough gotcha points so that we can win the fight. In these confrontations, our fight or flight instincts begin to kick in. And in the end, somebody wins. Somebody walks away feeling like they have accomplished what they wanted to. But even in those circumstances, when somebody wins, the relationship is damaged, and therefore both parties lose. I've said it before, and I will continue to stand by this statement. If you win and your spouse loses, then your relationship loses. And so, in order to win these fights, we have to reframe what it means to win. In order to win in this sense, you have to bring your spouse along for the win. You have to stop hurting them. You have to stop trying to get a gotcha moment. And you have to start listening. You have to try to understand. Because that's not what most of us do. In fact, the wise King Solomon said that is human nature. He said, "Fools find no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing their opinion." And when you think back to the many fights that you've had, whether they're little things or big things, this really is the crux of the problem. Nobody wants to understand. Everybody just wants to share their opinion to get things off of their chest, and nobody wants to listen. Former Secretary of State Dean Rusk explained that one of the best ways to persuade others is with your ears, by listening to them. And that's the goal. This message and this whole sermon series, the goal is to stop this cycle of fighting. But the first step in stopping that fighting is to understand what the other person is saying, to understand who the other person is, and to do that, you have to choose to listen. If you're going to understand who someone is at the core, where they're coming from, then you have to know who you're dealing with. You have to get inside their head and understand how it is that they process and how they think. In the past, I've encouraged you guys to read the book Crucial Conversations. It is not a marriage book. In fact, it's not even a Christian book. It is a book about conversations. It's a book about communication. And if you are interested in it, I have 3 copies sitting right back there on the sound booth. Before you leave, see me, and I will give it to you for free if you will read it. But in that book, it explains how we think, this path to action, how we get to the point where we actually act on something. And it all starts way back when we perceive things. We see something or we hear something. These are facts. There is no debating them. Your spouse is working late. That's a fact. No matter how you feel about it, no matter what you think about it, that right there is a fact. Your spouse forgot your anniversary. That is a fact. You can't debate it. It's what we do with those facts that really matters. Because once we have our facts, it's usually an incomplete picture, and so we begin to fill in the gaps. We begin to tell ourselves a story based upon those facts. Well, they're working late to avoid me. Or they forgot our anniversary because it's just not that important to them. We can't prove it. We don't have anything to back it up. We're just filling in the gaps with our best guess as to why this person would do this. We fill in the gaps with a story that makes sense to us, even if we can't prove it to be true. But then our story informs our feelings. Well, I'm depressed or I'm angry because they don't value this relationship like I do. Or they don't love me because I'm too clingy, or I'm too ugly, or I'm too whatever makes you self-conscious inserted into there. And our feelings will then dictate how we act. We'll begin to make comments. We'll begin to treat them one way because they're doing it to us. We avoid them. We resort to silence or violence. We give them the silent treatment, saying, well, if they don't know what they did, then I'm not going to tell them. Or we begin to push and poke and provoke, trying to get some reaction out of them. And, I mean, we're justified in doing it because they started it. They're the ones that did insert your story here, and therefore it's okay for me to do this. And as I explain this thought process, I'm sure some of you are thinking back to a scenario when you did the exact same thing. You saw something, or you heard something, and it wasn't they were facts, but it was an incomplete story, so you began to fill in the gaps yourself and create yourself a story or a narrative that informed your feelings and influenced your actions. You're not alone. Everybody does this. It's instinctual. Many times we don't even realize we're doing it. We go through the process because that's just how we're wired, not even realizing the steps that we've taken. But the thing is, everyone else is doing the same thing. Everyone else is going through that same process where they're getting some facts, they're making up a story, it's influencing their feelings, and then influencing how they act. The problem is, we don't come into other people's path of action until the very end, until they begin acting out on that story and those feelings. And a lot has taken place up to that point. Before we even know that there's a problem, there was this whole process that took place. And many times the problem that we see is not the real problem. It's a symptom. And if we want to address the real issue and not just the superficial problems, then we have to begin to move backwards along this path of action. We have to get to the heart of the story. We have to know how those feelings influence the action, how the story that was crafted influenced the feelings and the facts that started off the whole process. But we can't read minds. The only way that I can know what's going on in your head is if you tell me. The Crucial Conversations book talks about a pool of meaning, where I have my story and my feelings and everything over here, and you have your story and your feelings over there, and I can't get to yours and you can't get to mine. But if I share, if I tell you my story, if I tell you my feelings, I contribute it to the pool of meaning. This pool of meaning is a shared knowledge base, where I share my thoughts and I share my feelings, I contribute to this pool, and then anyone can draw from that pool of meaning to help inform their own story and to inform their own feelings. And the best way to communicate is for everybody to contribute as much as possible, the more information the better, into this pool of meaning, but we're often hesitant to do so. We don't want to share because we don't feel safe. We feel like if we do so, we are going to be hurt. Take, for example, a child. They've done something wrong, and the parents are asking them about it. And so they begin asking, tell us what you did, and the kid clams up because they don't want to share. As soon as they tell you what they did wrong, then they're going to be punished. So why in the world would they tell you just to bring more pain upon themselves? Or many times we fear ridicule. People are going to laugh at us. People are going to think we're stupid or crazy if we share. Or if we do share, people just aren't going to care at all. And so why would I waste my time talking if it's not going to do any good? Why would I risk being vulnerable if it's not going to make a difference? And so in order to get other people to contribute to this pool of meaning, we have to make them feel that it's safe to do so. And to do that, you first and foremost have to be sincere. It sounds really simple, but it's true. You've been in those conversations where people ask you, how's your day? Or you begin talking, and it becomes abundantly clear that they're asking the questions, but they don't really want to know the answers. And so everybody puts on a mask and just pretends, but you don't get below the surface. If you want the other person to contribute, if you want them to add to the pool of meaning, then you have to let them know that you really care, that you really do want to know. And when they do that, you have to actually listen. Because people know if you're asking because you're supposed to, or if you're asking because you truly want to know. You have to show them with your words, with the tone of your voice, and with your actions that you really do care and that you really do want to know. But then throughout the conversation, you have to be curious. You didn't marry a crazy person. Or at least when you married them, you didn't think they were crazy. If they're crazy now, it's your fault. When you married them, they were sane and they were rational. So what makes you think that anything is different today? Be curious as to why they're doing what they're doing. If they're not crazy, then why would a sane and rational person act this way? Or why would a sane and rational person think this or behave in such a manner? And ask yourself that question. Be curious to figure out why. Explore their story. Don't just jump to conclusions, but begin to pull them out. Look for opportunities to ask questions, to explore what's going on inside their head, and remain curious. Even when what they say is unflattering. Ask yourself, why would a sane and rational person have these thoughts? Why would they think that I'm mean or don't love them or what. Why would they think this? Because they're not crazy, so there must be an underlying reason. And then be patient. Guys, this is our problem. I know it. I deal with it all the time. Whenever a problem gets presented, we're in the middle of a conversation and somebody says something, then I have to fix it. Right then, right there, as soon as possible. It's wired into our brains. But you have to resist that urge. Pushing, trying to solve the problem too quickly, is only going to make the other person feel unsafe. It's only going to make them think, well, they're not really listening, because truthfully, once you start trying to fix that problem, you've stopped listening. So you need to be patient. Because throughout the conversation, if you are sincere, and if you remain curious, you'll begin to draw that person out and begin to get more of their information. But even as they begin to contribute, it takes time for those feelings, the anger, the jealousy, the unsettledness, it takes time for those feelings to settle down. So be patient and allow the time for them to find security in the conversation. And I know it sounds easy when you write it down, but in practice, it is really hard. And it is a lot of work to go about fighting in this manner. And you may think, if the problem is in their head, if the problem is somewhere stashed in there, then why should I even worry about it? Why should I even care? If they're the problem, why do I have to fix it? The words from Paul to the church in Philippi speak specifically to this. Because we as Christians, he tells us, don't do anything for selfish purposes. But with humility, think of others better than yourself. Instead of each person watching out for their own good, watch out for what is better for others. The goal, as a Christian, no matter what relationship you are in, the goal should always be to serve the good of others and not yourself. And this is true in your working relationships. This is true with your friends. This is true with total strangers. It's true with the parent and child relationship. But we're talking specifically today about the relationship between a husband and a wife. And in those relationships, above all others even, you should be seeking the good of the other person. And if they feel unsafe, then it is your responsibility to help them to feel safe. Because when you feel unsafe, you go into a silence or violence mindset. Your instincts of fight or flight begin to kick in. And that's the reason for these tactics, to invite people into a conversation, to invite them to contribute to that pool of meaning. But you have to listen to what they're saying in a way that makes them feel like they're safe. And it's counterintuitive. When you're in the middle of a conversation like that, everything within you says, no, I need to say my piece. I need to put this out there. I need to win. And it can often feel, when you're taking time to listen, it can often feel like you are conceding the fight. Like you are choosing to lose the fight. But I will tell you that if you can take a step back, if you can risk losing the battle, then you will be better positioned to win the war. Because like I said, if you win and your spouse loses, then you both lose. In the book Crucial Conversations, they give 4 power tools to help you to begin or to continue in these conversations. And these power tools are abbreviated with the acronym AMP. Ask, mirror, paraphrase, and prime. You start off, ask. to get things rolling. This goes hand in hand with being curious. Begin asking questions. Hey, what's going on? You seem upset. What's happening? Or even when they do begin to talk, remain curious and draw them out. What do you mean when you say whatever it is they said? And it doesn't even have to be a question. What you're doing here is continuing to invite them into the conversation, making them feel that it's safe to contribute to this pool of meaning. I really want to understand what's going on. Or even flat out telling them, don't worry about hurting my feelings. I wouldn't be asking if I didn't really want to know. Asking is a great way to start the conversation and to continue the conversation moving forward, to get everybody to contribute to that pool of meaning. And then you can begin to mirror to confirm their feelings. Now, mirroring is not mimicking. I'm not saying, well, if they raise their arm, you raise your arm, or if they say this, then you have to say the same thing back to them. That is not what I'm talking about with mirroring. In mirroring, you are reflecting back to them how their words and how their actions are being perceived. You are describing what they look like in their actions and their attitude, especially if their actions and their attitude don't match the words that they're saying. I'm sure you've heard somebody say, it's fine, just do whatever you want. And you know that while the words say, it's fine, do whatever you want, their attitude, the tone of voice is saying something completely different. And so, mirror it back. Reflect it back. You're telling me that it's fine, but the way that you said it makes me think that it's really not fine. When you do this, it demonstrates respect and it demonstrates concern to the other person, letting them know that it's okay to share, that I'm paying attention and listening to what you're saying. It creates safety when our tone expresses that whatever feelings they're having, it's okay to have those feelings. And it's okay to express those feelings. And then paraphrase to acknowledge their story. My son Andrew is really good at this. He doesn't even know that he does it, but he does it all the time. I've heard it said that when you're giving kids instructions, many times their mind is somewhere else, and so it's good to ask them to repeat back the instructions to make sure that they really heard you. And so I can tell my kids, take that clothes basket to the laundry room. Now, repeat back to me what I said, and they will repeat back, take that clothes basket down to the laundry room. But when I do that with Andrew, he does something completely different. I say, Andrew, take that clothes basket down to the laundry room. Now repeat back to me what I said. And he says, I need to get that clothes basket from the living room and take it downstairs and put it in the laundry room. Now he said the exact same thing that I did, but he put it into his own words. He had to process it and run it through his mind rather than just regurgitating the exact same words that I used. And I know that he understands because he did that. And that's this whole technique of paraphrasing, is you process the words and you repeat them back in your own words. And what this does is it lets them know, it demonstrates, yes, I'm listening. And yes, I'm understanding because I can tell you what you said without just mimicking the words that you used. And it also gives them the opportunity to correct you if you're wrong. If you paraphrase back to them and you got it completely wrong, then they say, no, this is where you missed it. Or, yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Tell them, if I'm understanding correctly, you don't like it when I'm on my phone while we're talking because it makes you feel as if I don't care about what you're saying. Is that correct? And give them the opportunity. Invite them to correct anything that you've said that may be wrong. And remember, through this, you have to remain sincere. You have to remain curious, and you have to be patient. This isn't so what you're saying is that I can't have friends of the opposite sex because you're possessive and you don't trust me. That is not paraphrasing. That is jumping to conclusions. You have to stay focused. Why would a rational, insane person have these thoughts? How could a rational, insane person come to these conclusions? And don't push. Remember, you have to be patient. If you continue to push when they aren't ready, when they don't feel safe, you're doing nothing but pestering them. Let the conversation take its time and flow as people feel safe to contribute to that pool of meaning. And then prime when you're getting nowhere. You've probably heard the term priming the pump. When I was a kid, in our backyard, we had a really old water pump. You know, those kind that stand upright and they have the big handle on the back. And on the front of it, it had a little notch where you were supposed to hang a bucket. And I was told that the reason for that bucket is because you could sit there and you could pump on that thing all day long and get no water at all. But if you were to take that bucket and put a little bit of water into the pump, then that water will help to pull the rest of the water up, and you can have all the water you want from that pump because you first primed it. And it's the same thing in conversations. If you're getting nowhere, if they've gone to silence or violence and they won't share anything, offer your best guess. Try to guess sincerely what the problem is, and this encourages them to join the conversation. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but are you thinking that I'm choosing to work long hours so that I can avoid spending time with the family? It prompts the other person to either confirm or correct that which has been said. Now, this one is to be a last resort. If you can ask questions and they are contributing, don't be jumping to conclusions. Don't be putting words in their mouth. If you're already being patient and sincere and curious and they just aren't sharing, then you can choose to prime the pump. Because this one can easily go wrong. So use it as a last resort. Because starting from somewhere, if you're getting nowhere, starting from somewhere is better than not starting at all. Now, these are the power tools as you're getting into a conversation to help encourage the other person and to draw out that information so that you can move backwards on that path to action to understand the story that they've told and the facts that it was based on and the feelings that it has created within them. But even in those, when you're drawing out, when you're in the middle of that conversation, it can be frustrating to just let them talk and to let them contribute to this pool of meaning, because it can feel like you are lending credibility to an outrageously crazy story. I mean, what if they are really wrong? What if their story is completely out of left field and makes no sense at all? What then? If that's the case, and they are really that wrong, it's okay. You're not saying that their story is right. Their story may be wrong, but the feelings that it created are absolutely real. Encourage them to share it all. And when the information is in that pool of meaning, when everybody has contributed, then you can begin to discuss the different perspectives. You can share your story and your path to action. Now, I know this morning I've spoken a lot from a secular book. And you may be wondering, Pastor, we came here to hear the Word of God. We didn't come here to hear what some author wrote. Why are you sharing this stuff to us? I'm sharing this stuff because this stuff mirrors exactly what God has told us to do. He says, know this, my dear brothers and sisters, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to grow angry. That's exactly what I've been teaching this morning. But this command can be difficult to follow because we get into the middle of it and we're in a conversation and we think, okay, I'm supposed to be quick to listen, I'm supposed to be slow to speak and slow to grow angry, but how do I do that? So I want to give you these tools to help you to follow what God is saying so that we can have the best outcome and grow closer to God in the process. Because I want to equip you, I've provided for you in your bulletins, there's an insert that's titled Exploring Wendy's Story. And it's an excerpt from chapter 8 in the Crucial Conversations book, and it goes through an example of how these tools can be used in a conversation so that you can have kind of a practice before you actually get into one of those conversations. Because let's be honest, your first try is probably not going to go as well as you want. You're probably going to mess up at first, and that's okay. The main thing is to keep the conversation moving forward, to keep encouraging safety and contributing to that pool of meaning. And when you're in the middle of those conversations, all this stuff can fly out the window and be really hard to remember, so just remember your ABCs. A is for agree. Try to focus on the areas of agreement, whatever they may be. Whenever you get into a conversation, we tend to focus on the areas where we differ, when we agree on so many things. So focus on where you agree and start from there. And then B is for build. Build upon the other person's points rather than arguing with them. Tell them, I agree with what you're saying, but additionally, I also think, piggyback off of what they're saying to build into the conversation. And C is for compare. Don't tell them that they're wrong. Instead, compare your perspective to theirs. I understand what you're saying, but I think I see things a little different. Let me explain how I understand it. People don't like to be told that they're wrong. Even if they are wrong, they don't want to be told that they're wrong. And so compare with them to let them see it from a different perspective. Listening is a difficult skill to master. I haven't even mastered it, although I am way better than I used to be and still sometimes mess up. But making an attempt will improve communication no matter the scenario. And like I said, it may feel like you are forfeiting the battle, like you are giving up and letting them walk all over you. But I would encourage you to play the long game. Risk losing the battle in order to win the war. Give up some ground so that you can work together to attack the real problem and get to the heart of the issue. Because no matter the relationship, no matter the topic, the only way to win is to win together. The only way to win a fight with your spouse is if the two of you work together to address and to find the real problem. Because like I've said, if you win and your spouse loses, then you have already lost. Bow your heads and pray with me. Lord Jesus, you have called us to listen. And in the heat of the argument, in the middle of everything, when emotions are raging, it can be difficult to do. And so, God, I pray that you help us to listen. Help us to be slow to speak and slow to become angry and to choose to listen and to use these tools to encourage the other person to speak. God, be in that next conflict, wherever it may arise. Help us to be sincere and curious and patient as we explore the path to action that has brought them to this point. And God, be aware of our own stories and our own feelings that contribute to our actions as well. God, help us in those crucial conversations to seek your glory above all else, to seek the good of the other person rather than our own selfish desires. God, go with us this week and prepare our hearts, prepare our minds for what you have in store. We pray this in the holy name of Jesus. Amen. God bless you guys, and we'll see you next week.